This is the start of a transformation of an E46 M3, really rare colour in Oxford green. And it's got kiwi leather inside, predominantly used for track. And this customer's come in to us, Redish Motorsport, to have the subframe repaired and reinforced, or the subframe panel as we call it. So it's got a hairline crack coming through there which has got corrosion in it, and there's some cracks above the front right mount in that section, and also the side panel has dropped slightly up by the shock absorber. So this is just a video showing the condition of the car before it came in, because we're going to be changing quite a lot of things on this, so we thought we'd show a before and after. So go through the list and show you the things that the car is going to be having, and then the old items first. So we're going to be changing the exhaust system. Customer supplying a different exhaust system, mainly because we've got cracked flanges up here, but also it's changing the centre section. We're going to change the suspension for Ohlins coilovers, a separate spring and shocker rear, and then an Ohlins coilover, true coilover strut on the front to replace these BMW ones. Also going to be changing these subframe bushes, which are a bit tired because the car's got over 100,000 on it now, and they're the original bushes. So we're going to be going for Powerflex black on these bushes, along with the trailing arm bushes. They appear to already be Powerflex, so we'll check over those and make sure those are good to stay. Going for rear top mounts on the top of the suspension, rear shock absorber, changing those for Powerflex black. Possible front suspension top mounts or camber plates if we need to put some more additional camber on the front. Rear trailing arm ball joints we're going to be doing, these pair here, because we're also going to be changing these camber arms for Eibach aluminium adjustable camber arms. Also a H&R anti-roll bar kit is going to replace the rear roll bar and the front roll bar, and we'll assess the condition of these drop links and possibly change those if needs be. Going to be changing a few exhaust fittings and nuts and bolts, these ones at the back of the cat which always corrode so badly that they almost fall through. Then there's a couple of things up underneath the front engine tray to keep this car safe and sensible on track. There's a few power steering leaks, specifically the power steering cooler which is at the front of the bumper. That one's leaking, which is going to be changed for BMW 1. Constant pressure valve up in the engine block is leaking, so we'll change that as well. And the timing chain tensioner seal ring up over on the exhaust side of the engine. Diff input seal is also leaking, so that's going to be changed and renewed whilst we've got the chance, whilst it's all out of the car. And the output seal on the right hand side I believe as well. And then I think the last thing is we're putting a couple of seats in there, Recaro seats that the customer supplied, and also the engine oil cooler and the pipe set, because they've corroded quite poorly on the hose system just up here underneath the front under tray. So that's the starting video, and we're going to get started now stripping this car down and get going on the rear subframe repair and reinforcement process. And here's the Ohlins coilover set for the E46 M3. So this is the first look at the underside once everything's stripped off: the exhaust prop, heat shields, fuel tank, fuel filler neck, rear axle complete. Still got to take the shock absorbers out and the brake lines. You just get to see the dirt and corrosion level that builds up over the years. So 2012, so 14 years old nearly, 131,000 miles I think it is. So general dirt and muck and grime and mud in the arch, which we'll clean out and degrease thoroughly. Interesting brake pipe replacement from a previous repair, I'd imagine. A copper pipe, which we're not fans of anyway. Not in its holder, too long, cable tied, various things like that. So that will be replaced as part of this visit. And if you make a mental note of what this dirt and corrosion looks like, and then fast forward to the very end of the video, or the last video stage, and you see the different It'll be colour coded, Oxford green, clear lacquered, looking fantastic. So that's the left front mount there, and we've got a hairline crack around the whole mounting pin. Possibly spot weld movement over here as well. You see those black marks where the bush has been pressing against the floor. There's the front right, the one that always gets a problem. And you can see the spot weld is broken and a hairline crack has developed and going up the front side up there, or the top vertical section, and then there's also a crack going forward towards the front of the car. Various spot weld flexes which may have broken, we'll check, and obviously a hairline crack around the front mount as well. Possible other spot weld failures up at the top corner sections of the floor roof front section. Probably one up there as well. Looking like there's a couple in this section, a couple of corrosion circles, which may well suggest failure once we get that out. And then turn around to the other side, the right rear, which we need to clean up and inspect to see if there's any cracks under that. And then we've got an obvious one on the left rear, common crack there which has got corrosion, and the sealer's opened up to show the crack, and a few spot welds that have been flexing and moving. And then in the side panel we've got a definite spot weld failure there, and probably one up in that section. I think a little bit of a sealer drop in that corner to show that the panels moved slightly. There's degreased majority of it, and some of the previous waxy brake pipe coatings actually stained the sealer there. Interesting. Various bits of corrosion, nothing too heavy, a little bit more than we'd see normally. Most of it's surface corrosion. I haven't come across any solid or nasty holes or anything like that at the moment. Just on various brackets. And interestingly, now it's been degreased. Look at this right rear subframe mount area that before degreasing, when it was covered in dirt and grime and road salts and oil and all sorts of things, there didn't appear to be any cracks. And this is what we're saying about how important it is to degrease thoroughly, because now it's degreased. Very small hairline crack, just noticeable in that very corner position, which is a surprising one to see. You don't normally see them on this side. And again, it goes to show that it's a thorough process is needed to identify every single crack and spot weld failure. The initial spot weld and crack location and damage removal has started now, so partway through cleaning this up. And a couple of more areas I want to have a look into. We've got a dent in the floor here where that gap of the crack is, where the bush has been pushing up. So I want to go inside and check the internal mounts up in here to see if there's any damage on those MIG welds where that floor has been dented upwards. Also, there looks to be a spot weld failure here on the roof, which is going to be inside the cabin. Some seal is going to need to take off if this turns out to be a spot weld failure underneath the car. Definite spot weld failure there, so that's going to need drilling out and weld in, and that will need some sound deadening material taken off in the cabin inside the car. Probable spot weld failure here. Actually, looking at the shape of it and the colour, it's almost guaranteed. One there, and possibly one here as well. And if so, that would be suggesting that the panel's dropping slightly. Again, another reason why seal is going to need to be taken off. Going to look internal cavities at the rear, because those three spot welds, well, definitely those two there, look like they've got some early signs of movement compared to these ones up here. The right hand side always gets corroded because it's getting a lot of water on that side of the bush, it's exposed, and obviously it does suggest flex as well, so that's why we're going to send a borescope camera inside those mounts and check out there's no failures. And a couple of spot welds here at the rear chassis leg area. I'm just going to take some seam sealer off and check to see if there's any problems. So cleaning the seam sealer off, and there's definite two spot weld failure here on the roof. One there showing the panels dropping, and the other one quite a gap in that one, and a very small hairline crack trying to come out of the very top of this picture, although it's not the clearest thing to see. So we'll address those, and also in the other corner down at the front there's also a failed spot weld with 3 hairline cracks coming out, and when I've drilled removed the layer of the rear axle carrier panel, you can see the shadow in there showing the gap where the panel's being pulled downwards. There's about nearly a 2mm gap there. So I've drilled those 2 spot welds out, and you see that one there showing how much the panels come down. A couple of millimetre gap there, just like that one over in the corner. Well, and that one actually has a little bit of a gap there. 1 hairline crack coming out, which we've stopped drilled. A couple of the other ones are scratch lines where the drill bit was moving. And then this is the diff carrier or subframe carrier that came out of the car. This wasn't visible until coming apart, but you can see that is the diff front bush, the only bush on the front of the diff. It just has this one on the right hand side, and that's completely split and almost sort of expelled its rubber foamy sort of piece out of the inside. So that will need replacing. So I've come up inside the car and had a look at the area where we had 2 spot welds failed underneath, which are these 2 here. They were the ones that were broken underneath the car, and I've had to remove the seam sealer and sign deadening pads so that I can allow a good weld penetration without catching fire or melting and causing a contamination problem with the weld penetration. And I can see that the panel, or the floor, what we call the rear axle carrier panel, has dropped very, very slightly. Nothing much, but you see there is a gap of maybe 1 to 2 millimeters between those 2 panels, when compared to further along it's touching, as it should be. So that's the spot weld which has failed, which has allowed the panel to be pulled down ever so slightly. So as well as we're replacing those 2 spot welds, whilst I've cleaned all this up, I'm going to do a couple of stitch welds to hold those panels back together so that they don't continue to flex and move. I've had a good look around in the rest of the car as well, and drilled an inspection hole above the front subframe mounts where we had the slightly dented floor underneath the car, and there is a very small hairline crack in this hidden cavity. Now I've put the torch on. This is behind the driver's side in the rear passenger seat. Taken a redundant bracket off that's only used for touring models, drilled a 20mm access hole, and inspecting the factory MIG welds that hold in the front mounts of the rear subframe, and there is a very small hairline crack coming out of the bottom side of this one, which is that black line heading off down towards the bottom right, sort of 5 o'clock on the picture. And that's a crack which has got wax in it, and then the air and dirt which is rushing around in here during driving, I suppose, gets stuck in that wax in the crack, and which turns it black. So because we can't obviously send the car away with a crack in it, we are going to have to open a section here, just a small panel section, which will all be hidden behind the back seat area and sound deadening pads, and remove that broken weld and stop the crack, and then repair the problem, and then put a new panel, very small reinforcement panel or covering panel over this section here, and then put the sound pads back on. So it will look neat and tidy, but we need to do that, which is going to be a little bit more extra labour, but nothing horrendous. And obviously, as you can see by the video, it's something that we strongly think is going to be required. Now I've got an access panel. You can see those 2 welds a little bit clearer. There's one there and one there, and this one's got a couple of cracks. It's got one in that black line coming towards the bottom of the screen at 6 o'clock, and another little one trying to go at the top, and one also trying to go through the left of the MIG weld, or going towards the centre of the MIG weld, heading over to 9 o'clock area. So I've cleaned some of the dirt off now, and you can see the cracks a little bit clearer. There's the one at the bottom of the MIG weld coming out, and that one going through there's one going through the top, going up there on the side of the MIG weld, and that one that was going across the MIG weld to the centre is actually
showing itself has gone all the way through the MIG weld and out the other side and heading off at an 11 o'clock angle. And then over onto the other side, open the other side because they're small. You wouldn't do them as singly, you do them as a pair. And there is a tiny hairline crack as well coming out the top of that weld heading into the panel. So luckily that we checked this thoroughly, and these will need to be welded now. It's not part of our standard procedure, so a couple of hours labour more, but as you can see, a thorough repair like this will keep the car in good health for many years to come, especially if the car is going to be used on track. And now it's ready to weld. So I've stop drilled the ends of the cracks and belt sand removed the factory MIG weld, so that would have been what it looked like at the factory before they were welded. And so I've removed their broken welds or at-risk welds, and now I'm going to apply our own welds and penetrate the two layers together more effectively than they were done previously. And there's the other side ready to weld. This gives you a good idea of the extra strength we've just added with these stitch welds from inside the car. The penetration has come through the panel to show that we've connected to both pieces, and the two holes that you're seeing there are the spot welds that I drilled out. That was what was connecting the panel to the chassis leg inside the car previously, and those two had failed. So I'll fill them up now and do a plug weld to hold them again, but also with those three stitch welds in this corner, that now obviously holds the panel far greater than the spot welds ever did. So the reinforcement plates, or sorry, the cover plate should I say, shaped to the shape of the floor and stitch welded on to cover the access holes we made. And then when we took the seam sealer off to do spot weld, plug weld from underneath, got good penetration there. You can see the weld come up to this top panel, so that's all three layers connected well. And if we hadn't taken that seam sealer off, then it would have obviously just burnt, caught fire and made the weld really porous. Other side, and also the two spot welds we did to repair those broken ones there, and you can see the MIG welds that we, stitch welds that we did from inside the cabin as well. These are things that need replacing on your vehicle, either that we found during the strip down process that were in poor condition or corroded, seized or broken, or in the case of the brake pipes, these are the metal brake pipes that go above the rear fuel tank and over the axle. The right one over the axle is a copper one, which was ever so long, incorrectly routed, and was very corroded on the union on the right hand side. So we'll need to replace that one, and the other two there are for the two on the left rear of the fuel tank, which are really corroded and have been sprayed over with some wax, but they're very heavily corroded, so it's an absolutely perfect time to replace these so they don't ever give you any future problems at MOT stage. This heat shield was very much broken around the mounting point, so it was rattling. So for about 10 or 11 pounds, we're going to hopefully suggest and agree that we pop one of those on whilst we put the car back together. The front diff bolt does need to be replaced due to the threads being very tight when they were being removed, and also the rear ones are part of the Powerflex bushes, but the front one isn't, so we'd recommend a new BMW diff bolt at the front. That takes a hell of a lot of torsion, and we think that's a sensible thing to do. Brake pipe clips that were broken out due to corrosion, that the studs had corroded and broken expanded the plastic inners apart. Power steering reservoir O-ring, we saw weeping, so for a few pounds we chased that. A couple of Jubilee clips which are corroded on the worm gears, which we're going to replace for you. There's three common fixings here for some of the brake and fuel pipes that for a few pounds we think is essential to make a good job. Part of the process of putting your exhaust system on, we're going to need to renew the centre nuts and bolts, which are the BMW ones there. The prop shaft CV gasket, again only a few pounds. These are all what we just call consumable items. That's going to need to be replaced because it was leaking CV grease. One of the drive shaft bolts was so corroded that it didn't come out and the head rounded off, so we are going to have to replace one drive shaft bolt and one of the washers because that's damaged on the way. We had to remove that with mole grips, and also the rear exhaust hanger, the nuts are quite corroded and were troublesome to come off, so we're going to suggest changing those ones as well. So all the repair and reinforcement process is done now on this E46 M3. Just a quick look at the left front plate there, reinforcement plate, after the crack work behind that is sorted. There's the little filler spacer plates. There's the right front plate. There's the right rear. And there's the left rear plate there. Little bits of stitch welding and plug welding where we had to do some extra welds upon the roof section of this panel in the corners, and as well down in the side stitch area, 3 plug welds and then a panel join together in the outer arch. And then you see also there was lots of corrosion on these brackets, and rather than spray over these and trap all that rust in, we decided to take that off and get rid of as much of this loose flaky corrosion as possible, so that the paint is going to adhere and stick to it properly. Not part of our normal standard process, but something we like to do if we can see we can make an improvement in it. So we can do an etch prime now on this bare metal section. We've also made 2 out of the 3 new BMW metal brake pipes, the ones that go around the back of the fuel tank area and then over the axle. These are the 2 that go around the back of the fuel tank. So we've joined these into the factory lines down underneath the car, and they will sit up in there. So that's brand new BMW powder coated brake lines. They come straight, so we've shaped and bent those to match the factory ones. Gets rid of all the corrosion on the old ones, which would have bound to be an MOT failure at any minute now. And we've still got one more to make, which is the over axle one, which joins from here and goes over the axle to this supply circuit on the right rear side. That one will be done next as well. Etch primer is now applied on the bare metal, and then we'll be doing a high build primer next. And the high build primer is now applied, which is that matte black colour. So next we can move on to the colour application. The rear axle carrier is now painted in body colour Oxford Green 2. And there's a look at the left front plate there, reinforcement plate, and the right front. You see the pickup of the texture finish on this. There's our little spacer plates there. And then the right rear plate, and also the left rear plate. You just see some of the penetration marks where we've done the extra welding inside the cabin where they've come through. And then here's the panel where we blend and weld, do our stitch welding to hold the panel to the wheel arch panel, and 3 plug welds we replace in that area. So we've done a cavity wax in through behind those new grommets there, so that gets the wax all to the welded areas on both rear plates, and also done cavity wax in through these 2 opposing holes to make sure that we get wax all around the back of the welded plates and through these ones up here as well. And then we've also taken time to get the corrosion off of the spring perches and the brake pipe brackets and the fuel pipe brackets, and they've been now painted and sealed again in body colour Oxford Green. And then we finish up by the fuel tank up at this area up here, and we go a little bit further into the trailing arm section, and we had to replace metal brake pipes on these, so we've gone for the BMW steel powder coated black brake pipes, and these will also be waxed before they get hidden by the fuel tank shortly. So we've done our joins underneath the car there to the original ones. They come straight, so we've folded these to the shape of the original ones, replaced all the metal and plastic clips. So there's one there for the left rear circuit, and then the other one goes up to a factory joiner up on the roof, and then goes across the axle where we've again shaped it to the right fittings, and goes over to supply the right rear brake circuit. So now we can put the fuel tank in and then start building up the rear axle. And that's the front Ohlins road and track coilovers, left front and right front there. Stims do a height adjustment setup, but they're now on the car. We replaced a couple of power steering pipes. This main S-shaped one was already done, but we had a leak, quite a significant leak, from the hose
which connects to the cooler, which goes behind the radiator up there. So the cooler was replaced along with both hoses, the input and the output. One comes from the rack, which is this black one, and goes across to the cooler, and then the cooler then returns one back up to the reservoir pot up there. New Jubilee or crimp clips and sealing rings have been used in that place. Also done a constant pressure valve as well, which was leaking. That's up on the side of the engine block up there, new BMW one. A few more things to do in this engine bay coming up next. There's our covering panels over the front section where we had to cut open to weld the internal cavity cracks, and we've put the sound deadening pads back on, and just a little bit of body colour, which is the Oxford green, and you've got our cover panel there, which is shaped to the contour of the floor and stitch welded in place. So we didn't get a chance to update the video on this really nice Oxford green E46 M3 build. So the car went away, it's done some driving, a couple of months and 1,000 or so miles, and it's come back. That's why you see little bits of dirt and stuff splashed onto the floor and things, but still looking good. Plenty of durability on our paint finishes. So just to go over what the car had in the end, so it was the Redish Motorsport repair and reinforcement process with the additional stitch welding of the panel up into the chassis legs inside the car, and then the internal cavity work, which we showed on the video before. You just see the outline of our reinforcement plates around there, and one over on the right rear, and then we've got them above the front mounts as well. Then we also had this installation of the used exhaust section, which the customer supplied. Installation of the Ohlins coilover kit, a full kit front and rear. And Powerflex subframe bushes in the black compound. Powerflex diff bushes for the rear case, and the front diff bush over there in the diff carrier. Rear top mounts in Powerflex onto the Ohlins rear shock absorbers. They're also in the black compound as well. We also did Powerflex upper arm inner bushes, and then Eibach lower camber arms. Also ball joints in the trailing arms. So effectively, with the bushes in the Ohlins that come with it and the camber arms, that's a full bush set for the rear. Almost everything done there. It's just the anti-roll bar to do if the customer wishes to in the future. We also did a diff input seal, because there was an oil leak from the diff, an output seal for the right hand side. And I think the last thing was the metal brake pipes. New BMW metal brake pipes, all the way from underneath the car, correctly clipped in all around the fuel tank. They come straight, so we have to shape them, and new clips over the axle, along with that blue, cleaned up the blue fuel pipe, and then over to the right rear side. So a full overhaul for the rear end of this E46 M3. There's the finished product with Ohlins road and track coilovers, amongst other things that you've seen in the process, mainly suspension and interior underside work. We've opted for a Momo Suede 78 wheel, and customer supplied some used seats that he picked up.